Hello, everybody. Welcome to 12 Days of the Comic Source Presents Bad Idea. It's a Comic Source, Comic Boom collaboration coming to you for the holidays. Everybody knows what the 12 days of Christmas are. So as we're counting down 12 days away from Christmas, we decided this year, as Bad Idea Fan of the Year, I should celebrate Bad Idea. Rocky, unfortunately, doesn't have a Bad Idea retailer in his area. So I did, make some, I don't want to call them bootleg digital copies, but basically I just took a picture of the page by page of the books and sent them over to him so he could read them and talk about them too, because he's somebody I love collaborating with. I know he has a passion for good stories. We know Bad Idea has great stories. So we are going to show some artwork and some pages from the book, but just keep in mind, it's not the best quality. It's not meant to be. But as we're talking about these stories, we do want you to have some idea of how amazing they are. So we're going to kick it off with Bad Idea's very first release, ENIAC, which came out way back in 2020 now, I think, was their first release. Written by Matt Kindt, amazing artwork from Doug Braithwaite. If you follow Rocky's channel, if you listen to the Comic Source, we did review, I think, the first two issues way back in the day. But never had a chance to finish it. We're going to talk about the series as a whole now, and I'll kind of break it down a little bit by issue and give you an idea. I would say it's going to be kind of spoilery because we're going to talk about story beats. We're going to talk about the story overall. But I went back and reread all four issues in preparation to talk about this, and man, it was even better reading it. This is probably the third or fourth time I've read it, and every time I read it, I'm struck by kind of the complexity of the story, the little Easter eggs, the way Matt Kindt ties in real world events with the overall story of ENIAC. It's just so amazing. And the Doug Braithwaite art is just amazing. It's so great. So I love this series. I think it's very worthy of being Bad Idea's first release. And I have a feeling that the upcoming Megalith is probably going to be the most similar Bad Idea title to this in terms of quality and the scope of the story. That's Louis LaRosa art, and I can't wait for that as well. So, Rocky, this is, I think, the first chance you had to read the end of the series. What are your thoughts on it? Yeah, what are your thoughts on it 2 years later, finally getting to finish it?
Well, first of all, let me scold Bad Idea and my retailer online for, not scold Bad Idea, I got to scold my retailer. I really want him to get Bad Idea into his shop, but he has to date he has not done so. But I did read the first two issues. I reviewed them with you. It's such a timely story. It basically deals with AI, and I got to tell you, lately there's been a lot of movement on the AI front. And in fact, since we reviewed the first two issues, since that time, Chat GPT made its debut. It's evolved. I mean, AI, all of the timely issues, all of the sort of nightmare scenarios, the questions about AI, what it can mean, our fears, our hopes for it, our everything surrounding it, our anxiety surrounding what the worst that could happen. Would it be a Terminator scenario? Would it be something else? This is a comic book that plays into fears, plays into the optimism, plays into that wide range of emotions. It's a very timely tale, especially now, even more so than when it came out. So I was so interested to read how Matt Kindt ended this story, and I'm really excited to review the whole series with you now.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned how AI is, even more on the forefront than when this came out a couple of years ago. Being that ENIAC has its roots in World War II, which a lot of people still have, I almost want to say nostalgia for, like, the Greatest Generation or whatever. I mean, we were just so victorious. It was a real time for patriotism. This paints it in a little bit of a different light. And as I said before, Matt Kindt tying a lot of real world events into it. So let's talk about ENIAC in general. So ENIAC actually stands for Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer. So, and that was a real program that the U.S. government launched during World War II. One of the very first computers, gigantic, to try to, work on weather patterns and determine bomb runs and what have you in Europe. So, Kindt's story postulates what happens if that computer became a lot more intelligent, much quicker than we realized, much more advanced, gained sentience, and then kind of transcended us and sort of took over, if you will. So Yeah, as I said, the roots in World War II. So the story starts off, and we meet these couple of secret agents, if you will. They used to be in the U.S. military, now they're freelance. Um, they used to be a couple, actually. They met in the army, and they are very capable. I would say. Would you say, Rocky? Very capable.
Extremely capable, quite
Yeah,
capable. Yes.
yeah. Soldiers, assassins, what have you, and it's really interesting. So we have Fletcher and Falk. Fletcher being the Caucasian, Falk being the African American. And what's so interesting, so we get almost like a James Bond beginning, right, where we see them on a mission. They're taking out some Russians who were putting bounties on U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan, and they go and take them out and stop that. And then it jumps to an undisclosed location, and we see this guy who's out in the middle of nowhere in the desert, and he's sweating. And then we see Fletcher and Falk meet him out there, and they're all naked. And you're like, what the heck's going on? And that's where we get the first introduction into ENIAC. So this gentleman that's out there, he's actually the Secretary of Defense for the United States, and he's hiring Falk and Fletcher to take out ENIAC, and he's the one that gives us the origin of ENIAC and explains how, shows a couple of inventors, one guy who decides to really feed ENIAC a lot more information because he believes that ENIAC could be more. His name is Ned. The other inventor's name is Roman. So eventually, the U.S. government agrees, capitulates, and they hire these women to basically type the world's entire knowledge base into ENIAC so that ENIAC knows everything we know. And then the story postulates that the second bomb that was dropped, right? We know about the bomb being dropped on Hiroshima, the second one on Nagasaki. President Truman never gave the order for the second bomb to be dropped. That was all ENIAC. ENIAC knew that it would, save lives, and it would stop the war in its tracks. And so he's the one that actually gave the order. But Truman orders ENIAC destroyed. He thinks that Ned actually gave the order. He doesn't realize at this point that ENIAC is basically sentient. And on top of that, ENIAC also orders bombs dropped on other capitals, right? The capital of Moscow. I'm trying to remember where else. Anyway, there's 3 targets that they order the bombs to be dropped on it. And basically, it's ENIAC. He's trying to stop the Cold War. Moscow, Leningrad, and Tankograd. So 3 targets in the Soviet Union to stop the Cold War from happening, because ENIAC has become so smart so quickly, even back then in the mid to late 40s, it was so smart it could almost see the future. It could almost predict what was going to happen. And the United States sends out a strike team to the aircraft carrier because again, these guys are just following orders. They don't realize that the orders are not coming from the president. And so the strike team is sent out, and they actually, it's American soldier killing American soldier to stop these bombs from being dropped. And in retrospect, you wonder if we might not have been better off had the Cold War was a lot of fear, a lot of worry from a lot of people that nuclear holocaust was going to occur. It never did, thank God. We're all still here. But you wonder, in a different scenario, if ENIAC might not have been right. But unfortunately, for the world at large, at least in terms of what the U.S. government feels, ENIAC was not destroyed. Now, remember, this is pre-internet. This is pre-network. So when they bombed Area 23, which was the place where ENIAC was created, they thought that they took ENIAC out. But come to find out, there was a spy there. He smuggled ENIAC out, or at least enough of his program that ENIAC was able to rebuild itself. It was a Russian spy. And so now ENIAC has, over the years, always sent a message on January 1st every year to the U.S. government, typically a quote from somebody famous, Gandhi, just very cryptic and kind of, hey, I'm still here sort of thing. And this year, the story postulates, the year the story is taking place, on January 1st, ENIAC doesn't send a message, doesn't send a quote, he just sends a countdown. And it's a countdown that basically something's going to happen in 3 days. And they don't know what it is, although they speculate that ENIAC, who has gained all sorts of knowledge and power and is in every system in the world, kind of think Skynet, right, from Terminator. they're worried that ENIAC's going to launch all the nuclear weapons and take out all of humanity. So that's what Falk and Fletcher are hired by the secretary to do, to go and take out ENIAC. And even though they're out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the desert, they think, no electronics, no clothes, whatever. They think they're safe from ENIAC's eyes. They're under an umbrella, so ENIAC can't see with a satellite or what have you. But ENIAC's smart. And basically what he does is he uses a satellite that's aimed at a solar panel that's quite a ways away from where they are. But it's ENIAC, right? He's electronic. He can look at the reflection in the solar panel from them, however many yards or a mile or whatever they are away, and enhance the image and read the lips of what the Secretary of Defense is telling Falk and Fletcher. Again, ENIAC is one step ahead. So he knows that Falk and Fletcher are coming after him. So, yeah, like you said, Rocky, AI, artificial intelligence, something that is so much smarter than us. And what could its motives be? They have no idea. So what else is interesting is when the creator talks about it and his co-creator talks about it of ENIAC, they talk about, Pandora's box. Should they do this? Even when when the government, the army comes to them and says, hey, ask the question, ask the equation, because we're told that Oppenheimer and his colleagues get stuck. They're not able to actually create the bomb. And it's ENIAC's knowledge and ENIAC's intelligence that allows the atomic bomb to be completed, the atomic bomb project, which ultimately ends the war. And at one point, Ned, he's reluctant to get ENIAC involved in that, and it's that question that I always talk about. We as a society, we as humans, as a civilization, so often we ask ourselves, can we do this? We're presented with a problem, can we solve it? At no point do we ever stop to think, should we solve it? Like you create things like the atomic bomb, you create things like VX poison gas, like maybe you shouldn't be creating it. There's that idea to strive and grow and invent, and it's something inherently human about that. You say, can I do this? Can I, overcome this challenge? Not stopping to think of should I, not stopping to think about the consequences way down the road.
Well,
That's a lot of what this first issue is, consequences.
And it's the scary thing about it is, it's both equally terrifying but equally possibly uplifting depending on what ENIAC does. Because ENIAC, you've created ENIAC, he, she, it, they, whatever you want to call it, it's created. Well, you created me. Well, you let Pandora out of the box. If you created something that's really good at the art of war, that is really good at chess, and you get your ass kicked, it wants to win. So you almost can't blame ENIAC for doing what it does at the beginning of this 4-issue series. It wins a war. At one point, ENIAC sends out a calculation that says 1 bomb, check, 2 bombs, checkmate. 2 bombs will end the world war. ENIAC is just acting logically, and ENIAC is a function of what we programmed it to be. And so we're getting exactly what we wish for and in fact created. And yet, we always we like to, the hubris of humanity. We're so arrogant. We will create an atomic bomb and then we'll pride ourselves for restraint and not using it. Like, well, why'd you create it in the first place then? So you could pat yourself on the back and not use it? Don't tell me you're not going to use it. You created it. And so can you blame artificial intelligence in thinking, well, we did create this, obviously we're going to use it, right? And so I kind of like that the aspect of this series that really I enjoyed, and I'll comment more when we get near and how this series ended so spectacularly, is that no, be careful what you wish for, and but only if you're really, really lucky will this AI, fortunately, but for the grace of God, literally a God in the machine, sometimes your salvation can come from the most unexpected of places.
Yeah, and it's sort of interesting, right? You talk about hubris, you talk about our flaws. None of us are perfect, humanity, human intelligence, or whatever. It comes with the inherent possibility of making a mistake. We're not machines. We have emotions. There's other reasons that we make mistakes we make. So it's almost like, can you create something that is mistake free? That's really the question we're asking here. So you're going to create this machine, and it only deals in in logic and ones and zeros. It only deals in facts. But at the same time, it almost has some emotion. It doesn't want to be destroyed. We've created it in a way. Its behavior, its thinking is modeled after us because we as humans created it. So of course it wants to survive. Same survival instinct that we have. Maybe a lot of the same flaws that we have as well. So as Falk and Fletcher go on the mission to destroy it, they quickly realize as they're heading to Russia to meet with somebody who had a hand in ENIAC getting smuggled out, and dealt with ENIAC during the Cold War when it sort of invaded all different computers around the world. He's kind of the last living link to ENIAC. They're on their way there. Their plane gets shot down. They realize, hey, ENIAC's not supposed to know we're coming, but does know we're coming. We get some great action scenes as Falk and Fletcher show how capable they are infiltrating this base. They rescue this guy. Supposedly, he may have a way to destroy ENIAC. We get some flashbacks, as I said, into what happened, after the war, and ENIAC establishes a base in a very remote part of Russia. Women and girls who'd gone missing that they thought had been killed. ENIAC actually gave them sort of a safe haven, and they sort of took care of ENIAC's needs, and in turn he gave them shelter. And there's talk of them being brainwashed into believing ENIAC provides and that sort of thing. But I mean, in reality, he does. And so this Russian and Ned, the original creator of ENIAC, go and come face to face with ENIAC for the first time since the attempted destruction of ENIAC after the end of World War II. And ENIAC says, I knew this day would come. I knew I would see you. I kind of wanted to kill you, but I really couldn't. I think of you as, my father. Be on your way. And basically, ENIAC, you want to talk about checkmate. ENIAC shows the world, these guys were there to try to find some way to destroy it. He shows the world that, no, I'm one step ahead of you. As Ned and this other Russian agent are there, at that same moment, like he times it out so well, at that same moment, nuclear devices are delivered to the Kremlin and the White House. And ENIAC could basically blow up Moscow and blow up Washington, D.C. So this Andronikov and Ned are basically forced to retreat. And ENIAC says, yeah, you will. And he starts a countdown on those nuclear devices, but he stops it at 1 second and says, basically, you only get to live because of my mercy, because I'm letting you live. But if you ever come after me again, I'll destroy you all. And so it's kind of like, you want to talk about the Cold War. So we, in reality, think of the Cold War as this ratcheted up tensions between communist countries and the United States and other Western superpowers and what have you during the, late 50s, mid to late 50s through the 60s, 70s, and up to about the mid 80s. But really, this postulates not just a Cold War between those countries, but also a Cold War between ENIAC. ENIAC's continuing to evolve, continuing to learn, and basically has his finger on the button, much like, you think about the Cold War, some guy somewhere with the finger on the button or a key to turn in a lock to launch a missile. ENIAC's got us over a barrel, but decides not to destroy us. So Falk and Fletcher rescue this Andronikov from this Russian prison. Hey, you have a way to destroy ENIAC. They take him to a very remote cabin, get the information out of him. He says he may possibly have a way to destroy ENIAC, but of course they're not really hidden from ENIAC. ENIAC sends some forces after them, and we find out Andronikov is mortally wounded, but we find out that the sort of the cloak or serape, poncho, whatever it is that he's wearing, I think it's technically a serape because it doesn't have any sleeves. It just has a hole for his head. It's got woven in it a binary code, right? Like a knot is 1 and a clear piece of straight piece of string is a 0. And so he's knotted it in such a way that it's binary code, and supposedly it's a way to destroy ENIAC, but they have to go and find a woman named Rosa Jules. She has the other half of whatever this very rudimentary analog program is that can destroy ENIAC. But as kind of a shocking twist, at the end of that issue, we find out that Fletcher's mother is Rosa Jules. It's actually Fletcher's mother. So again, you just wonder how many steps ahead ENIAC has been. So that's where the tension really starts ramping up. You start thinking, man, just how smart is ENIAC? How many steps ahead is he? And the Braithwaite art, if anything, it's even better than the first issue. So second issue, though, it's a little bit more intimate action. I mean, the first one introduced the story and had a huge scope. Now that we're focused in on these two female soldiers who are trying to take ENIAC out, we're seeing Andronikov get wiped out. We're seeing how ENIAC personally was affecting people's lives, these Russian women that were brainwashed and what have you. The story started to feel a little more like personal and intimate, so I appreciated that from Matt Kindt as well. What are your thoughts on the second issue, Rocky?
Well, the second issue the story just continues to build. We get more. We just get more. I was more fascinated with the second issue, just with the character building, just getting to know the characters. Fletcher, in particular, relationship with her mother, and that becomes more significant as we get into the final two issues, and just the rich history, because you don't. What I really like. I always like time travel tales. And I always like when writers can very cleverly sort of rewrite, take existing history that we know and love or know and hate, and rewrite it and say, we thought in our world, we thought this was happening, but it was really something very, very different. But yet it's radically different. And yet it actually is perfectly consistent with our history. We just didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. And that's what makes ENIAC so sort of brilliantly written and completely believable. And maybe I'm a product of my time, particularly the last 10 years, especially now when apparently aliens really do exist. And so many of the JFK, actually, there was a conspiracy to kill him. All these conspiracies are apparently true. Why can't ENIAC be true? For all I know, maybe this really happened and ENIAC, took control of Bad Idea and created a Bad Idea comic book company. And, maybe ENIAC's behind this entire publishing initiative, for all I know. Who knows? Matt Kindt is just a clone or something. But it's a really fun story, and it's sort of it. I love a comic book that takes itself seriously. It's written with a high degree of verisimilitude. I believe this stuff is happening, and I can be, if I was impressionable enough, you could convince me that, hey, yeah, this stuff actually happened. I mean, this would be something you could play a trick on one of your best buddy who's hammered all the time. You could, no, this is what happened. It's ENIAC, and I'm sure you could convince some people, if you could make a documentary and make it sound real, people would believe this story. That's what I love about it. Issue 2 just sort of carries on that central conceit, and it does it in a very convincing way. And bear in mind, that's when we stopped reviewing, was after issue 2. So, I mean, I've been like, in my head, I've been wondering, how is this thing going to end? So I want to get to talk about issue 3 and 4.
Yeah, and to your point of using real world events, that's the thing that really blew me away about issue 3. It kicks off and we get a chance to see Rosa Jules. We get a chance to see Fletcher's mother. She worked for NASA, and they bring in the Challenger disaster that happened in 1986. And it's said that, something, that O-ring that failed or whatever, it was something added to the blueprints by ENIAC that nobody realized. And it was a way for ENIAC to get himself out into space. So ENIAC is out there in space, infecting the satellites, expanding his sphere of influence, expanding his sphere of knowledge by being able to be in the satellites and observe humanity and what have you. Unfortunately, Fletcher's mother gets blamed for it, and she kind of loses it. In a way, she talks about being infected by ENIAC, like hearing it. She ends up in a mental hospital. Unfortunately, she's out in the desert for a while on her own with her daughter. Obviously, not the best environment for Fletcher to be raised in. She's experimenting with psychedelic drugs, mushrooms, that sort of thing. It's clear that this Challenger disaster really derailed her life. She's a brilliant scientist. Now she's kind of out there, one of those, crackpot conspiracy theorists, whatever. Kind of hard to understand her when she talks because it just seems like she's not making sense, not logical. But they go visit her in Stockholm, Sweden. Andronikov, did say, hey, she's got the other half of what you need to destroy ENIAC. And it's a wooden board that has holes in it. So it's kind of the other half, right? Like they have the string that has the knots. So you feed the knots into these holes in a certain order. And that's basically kind of a rudimentary, like I said, binary language, binary code that will supposedly kill ENIAC. So we get a little bit more flashback of Fletcher seeing, her life, some of the things that she's been through, and dealing with her mother's uh, almost like dementia, almost like schizophrenia in a way. And obviously Falk is concerned about her. They're not in a relationship anymore, but they were romantic at one time. So obviously, and they're still partners. So obviously, there's some concern there. So once they feel like, okay, we have these two pieces that we need to destroy ENIAC, they need to contact the Secretary of Defense to figure out, they need some backup. They need to go where they think ENIAC is, and feed this code in and destroy him. But how are they going to communicate to the secretary that they are ready for next steps and that they need backup? Well, what are you going to do if it's somebody who is able to hack all sorts of electronics? Carrier pigeon. They use carrier pigeons. They send a note to the Secretary of Defense. He's like, "Hey, your backup's already on the way." These soldiers show up, and they, first of all, they're gun ho, special ops soldiers of fortune, what have you, the best of the best. These guys are rough and tumble, and they're having to take orders from women. And the first thing the women do when they get there is say, "Take all your clothes off, get butt ass naked, and burn all your equipment. Anything that has a microchip, anything that ENIAC could, hack or whatever." And they're just like, "Wait, what? You guys are nuts, whatever." And they're like, "Trust us. This is going to keep us alive. Just wait till you see our plane," because the same thing with their plane, completely stripped down. No GPS, no radio, no radar, nothing. They're like, "How are we?" It's like we're flying blind. And Falk's like, "Hey, humanity was navigating long before there was GPS, thousands of years before. We'll be fine." So they get out to the middle of nowhere in Ethiopia. They find the kind of the silo or the bunker where um, where they think ENIAC is, and there's some hints that maybe Fletcher's mom isn't as crazy as everybody thought or she was presented. Maybe ENIAC really did infect her in some way, and not only Fletcher's mother, um, Rosa Jules, but maybe Fletcher herself. Because at one point, when they get close to the bunker, Fletcher kind of collapses, and when Falk looks at her, her eyes are all blacked out, and she's having a flashback. She's thinking back to previous times, and you kind of wonder what that's all about. So they go down into the silo, Fletcher, Falk, and the soldiers, and once again, ENIAC is steps and steps ahead of them. There are recreations of settings, of scenes, of places in these soldiers' lives. The flat that one soldier grew up in, where his father lived, is there. Um, it's clear again. ENIAC is not only did ENIAC know they were going to find him, not only did ENIAC know they were going to come and try to destroy him, he knew exactly which soldiers, which men were going to be there. So ENIAC again, one step ahead, and again, really great issue. Provides a lot of context to Fletcher and who she is, and a lot of hints about what's to come in the final issue. So I think the best thing about issue 3 is kind of the sense of foreboding that it creates. It really ratchets up the tension, as I said, and hints at things to come. So you had a chance to read it for the first time, Rocky. What'd you think?
You hit the nail on the head when you say build up tension. There's no question. I finished reading issue 3, and I was fairly convinced, and my suspicions, uh, well, my suspicions, I won't, I don't want to spoil issue 4. We'll be talking about that in a bit, but I, it immediately, I thought they were screwed. I thought how do you beat this thing? Because this thing, look at how far in just 10 years, since 96, when I think it was 1996 when Facebook came out. Look at the technological advancement we've had just since 96. And this ENIAC's been in existence since the 40s. And, and issue 3, it just seemed hopeless. I mean, that even even using carrier pigeons, communicating while naked in a desert, for God's sakes. I mean, trying to avoid and trying to just go analog, completely avoid technology. It's impossible. It just shows how truly impossible it is. And that's a compliment, of course, I think, to the writing as well, because it really made you think, where would you go to avoid being detected in this world right now, in our city? Where would you actually go? Because I mean, between streetlights, cameras, satellite, I mean, you're going to be found. And the hopelessness that arises at the end of this issue, you realize just how screwed these soldiers are, and just how, and more specifically, what the hell is ENIAC up to? What is ENIAC up to? What is an AI intelligence that has 60 years of thinking to do and planning, and can think a trillion times faster than any of us? What the hell is this computer AI been planning for all this period of time? And so by the time I'm thinking to myself, there's no way one issue is going to be able to answer that question. And it somehow it manages to satisfy me in a number of ways, and cause me to ask a lot more questions. But we'll get to that. But great issue 3, man. Great third act.
Yeah, don't give Facebook too much credit. 2004 is when it debuted, but yeah, but I mean, you're right. When you say 1996, so right around 95, 96 is when the internet like really took off. 96 was right around the time when AOL, American Online, was sending those discs out, and that was really a lot of people's first exposure to the internet, and kind of networking and social media, followed soon after. So you're not far off when you say 96 is kind of the the beginning of the internet age. I'd say mid 90s for sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, issue 4, it starts off, and we get a little bit more context about Fletcher's mother, and we find out that not only was Fletcher's mother really hearing ENIAC's voice, but Fletcher was as well. So it was in their orange juice. It was in the toys they gave her. It was in her little speak and spell. They call it a type and talk, but basically speak and spell. So ENIAC, it's been playing the long game. It knew that it would be Fletcher that was on the, one of the leaders of the team that would come to take him out all these years later. Just when you think about that, you can make it make sense. I mean, it seems far-fetched, but at the same time, man, if you knew every variable, you understood human behavior and what have you, you can predict things like that. When they get, they're trying to get through this maze, and it's basically like a psychops operation, they call it, because they're messing with these soldiers. There's hallucinogenic gases. There's scenes, things that remind them of their past. As I said, the one soldier, his father's flat is there. But Fletcher and Falk do make it to where ENIAC is, and Falk realizes that ENIAC has been one step ahead of them this entire time. And so Falk's thinking is, we can't do this. We can't put the little wooden board up there and feed in the knots or whatever, because if ENIAC has allowed us to get this far, that must be what it wants us to do, because it knows it has been able to like almost predict the future. So we can't do it. But again, Fletcher, in a way, has been brainwashed. She's always heard this voice in her head, and she thought it was her conscience, for lack of a better term. But really, it's been ENIAC all along that's been talking to her, and she's determined. There's a great scene where we get almost a reprint of a page that we got in the previous issue, where Fletcher was sort of remembering things that she went through in the Army and her youth and what have you. And now we're seeing them again from her perspective, but we're seeing them with the voice that she heard in her head, that she took to be, the voice in her head of her conscience or her will or whatever. But that voice is actually ENIAC that's telling her in those times, what to do, stand firm, that sort of thing. And so Falk and Fletcher actually have a little bit of a knockdown drag out, but ultimately Falk is not able to stop Fletcher from feeding in the little knots. And Falk pushes Fletcher out of the way, blasts a hole in the doors that lead to where she thinks ENIAC will be. And there's just a talking type there, a speak and spell, with a little message that says, "Goodbye, Fletcher, and thank you." And so you're wondering, like, what? Goodbye? Like, goodbye, humanity? And ENIAC's not there. He's not there any longer. And so Falk is obviously very concerned. Scene switches to sort of like a NORAD type setting where the defense secretary is. He's on the phone with the president. President's asking him how it's going, and the Secretary of Defense says, well, to be honest with you, I believe we might be well and truly fucked. All the nuclear missiles on the Earth are fired off. They send out all these strike teams to different places around the globe where they know, or they think, ENIAC has like little safe houses. Most of those soldiers are defeated in one way or another. Meanwhile, on the talking type that's down in that bunker where Falk and Fletcher are, there's a countdown. And when that countdown reaches zero, as I said, all the nuclear weapons are launched off. Everybody believes it's Armageddon, it's the end of the world, but ENIAC actually just launches all those missiles into space. They don't come back down. They go out into space and they basically float away, except for one. One flies to Mars, lands on Mars, releases a bunch of little drones that construct a rocket, and that rocket launches off into space and then sends a bunch of other little rockets out into the galaxy. And then we skip forward a little bit in time. We're in the Secretary of Defense's office. He's talking to Falk and Fletcher, and he's basically explaining, yeah, ENIAC launched all the missiles off. They didn't explode. He's basically sent himself out into the galaxy. He appears to be gone from Earth. And so that, that seems to be a good thing, right? Fletcher wonders if that's true. She has a little insight. She no longer hears the voice for the first time in her life. Her mother as well seems to be sane now, no longer schizophrenic, doesn't hear the voice anymore. And it's interesting. It is a good thing that ENIAC's gone. He's out there. Fletcher postulates that that ENIAC had no more to learn from us. Could have destroyed us, but didn't. Sees us as toddlers, not really worth destroying in a lot of ways. So he's out there out there in the universe, looking for something more than what humanity has to offer. So pretty interesting when you think about it. And then the secretary asks Falk and Fletcher if he can help them clean up some more messes that have been created, because now that nobody has any nuclear weapons, there are no more superpowers, quote unquote, and so they know they'll be busy doing soldier work. So I had forgotten about that part of the ending. Like, we easily could get a sequel. We haven't yet, but I'm sure Matt Kindt could dive back into the world of Fletcher and Falk. Wouldn't necessarily have ENIAC in it, but I wouldn't mind seeing what these two characters are up to now. And then, kind of as an epilogue almost, we do see Fletcher's mother. She's out in a kind of a remote cabin with a nurse. And again, she's not hearing the voices. Seems more sane, a little more connected to Fletcher than she's been in a long time. So all this worry, all this tension, all this angst that ENIAC was, there was a countdown. ENIAC was going to destroy mankind. Was ENIAC basically setting the wheels in motion to force the powers that be to use Falk and Fletcher to go and free him, to give him the means, with whatever that code was, to give him the means to leave Earth so he could go out there and search for something more. So yeah, in a way, kind of uplifting, right? Like, humanity created something, and it started off, and it was a little more malevolent at first, seemed that way, but in the end, it learned. It watched humanity. It learned. It sort of transcended and said, so often, you think of Star Trek or Stargate SG-1. That's another great show where there's these advanced civilizations, and they kind of look down on Earthlings a little bit. Oh, you're still young as a species. You still have a lot to learn. Doesn't mean there's not value. Doesn't mean we're going to kill you. But a little pat on the head, run along. And in a way, it was like ENIAC had outgrown us. He had outgrown humanity, and has left to find something better. Not to say it can't go out there and learn terrible things and come back and destroy us after all. But what a way to end it, right? What a twist. So what did you think of how it all wrapped up, Rocky?
Well, what I think is brilliant about this is why on earth would I think this would end badly? I'll tell you why. I projected my own fears into the story, and yet it became clear that ENIAC himself had more faith in humanity than I do. And what's funny is ENIAC could see through all our emotional bullshit. Even with Fletcher, I thought that was beautifully portrayed, as you indicated. Throughout Fletcher's life, it was ENIAC speaking to Fletcher. He could see Fletcher's potential. He could see humanity's potential, but he could also see our frailties and our flaws and our fears. And in a way, we're kind of pathetic. But the beautiful thing, the most positive thing one can say about a blindly logical AI is that it sees through the superfluous emotions and the stuff that the stuff that hinders us. the stuff that's holding us back, arguably. He knows what humanity is capable of. It's capable. We're capable of a lot of bad things, but our potential is even greater. And he saw that, but he also realized he had that he had no role in teaching us and pushing us along the way. He know that we needed more time. We're not like ENIAC is. So what does ENIAC do? Well, he's like I said, he's learned everything. What do you do when you learn when if you get everything you know? It's like when we're done reading a book or reading a comic. Well, we've read it, we know everything in it. What do? We move on. We want more comics. This ending reminded me of the end of Watchmen. Doctor Manhattan. He's learned every he can on Earth. He's going to go out and explore the multiverse. And ENIAC himself wants to do that. It's that thirst for knowledge. And how do you know ENIACs gain sentience? It's that thirst for knowledge. Once you have it, you need to have more of it. But also, not only does ENIAC get that sentience, but there's something about sentience. There's always that hint that sentience brings with it a degree of humanity, because that's clearly what ENIAC has. And ENIAC has a kind of a dark sense of humor, scaring the hell out of humanity by launching all those nuclear missiles, but launching them into space by scaring the hell out of us and hopefully scaring us into a better tomorrow and a better version of ourselves. And that's what I really love this ending, because it's throwing our fears in our faces and saying, you know what? You should be fearful of yourselves, but you should be more hopeful of what your potential is. And so I really love this story. And it gives me a little bit more renewed faith in AI, that it could be our savior, just as much as it can be our destruction.
Yeah, the difference, of course, being we haven't figured out a way to infuse any emotion into artificial intelligence yet. Because you're right when you say ENIAC displays this degree of humanity. It's right there in the message, right? When, he knows that if he were to come and ask, they'd say, no, we're not going to let you leave Earth. We'll find a way. Well, if ENIAC is actually benevolent or is not malevolent, how can we exploit it? How can we use it against our enemies, what have you? It doesn't want that. So, it doesn't let us in on what its plans are. But when it finally does manipulate events to the point where it's allowed to escape Earth, it thanks Fletcher. It says, Fletcher, thank you. Goodbye and thank you. There is that level of emotion, it was talked about in the very first issue by Ned. Hey, he talks about, well, if emotions are just chemical reactions, that, in a way that's just ones and zeros, it's the same thing. I've got to figure out a way to make ENIAC care. And so, I mentioned at the beginning, we were talking about this. ENIAC is made by a human. So, inherently it is sort of made in our image, if you will, because it's so heavily influenced by human behavior and what have you, because it's created by a human. And the other thing that gives me hope, it's like ENIAC wants to learn. ENIAC is in itself sort of goes through sort of a cycle of growth, right? Like it's sort of a toddler. It's sort of lashing out. It drops the second bomb. It goes through, a rebellious phase and adolescence, that being the Cold War. And now it's learned everything. It's watched humanity. It's time to move on. Could this be what humanity eventually gets to? Because ENIAC clearly wants the best for humanity. That's why it launches all the nuclear missiles. You mentioned it, scared straight sort of thing. Not so different from what the advanced underwater civilization in the Abyss does, right? They, at the end, the tidal waves are going to come. They're going to destroy all of civilization. Then they back off. Hey, wise up, stop polluting the planet. I know people think it's preachy from James Cameron or whatever, but I mean, the message is true. And so kind of the same thing here. ENIAC is going to go off. It's learned everything it can learn. It's done everything it can do on Earth. But as kind of a parting message, if you will, hey, if you follow the same path that I've done, if you, learn everything and take an objective look and have some humanity, have some empathy, you can get to the same place that ENIAC is in terms of knowledge, and know that the answer is not more weapons. It's not disharmony, but it's actually unity. And look what you can accomplish if you come together. You can transcend Earth. You can go out there into the galaxy, and who knows what else you might discover. So, absolutely amazing story, and a great balance with the character of Fletcher, with how much Falk clearly cares about Fletcher, to bring in that relevance to give us the smaller story and give us characters to care about. Fletcher's mom is another good example. Because if you just went with the wide scope, you might not have that touchstone that you can relate to and make it feel like a story that has emotion. And I mean, Falk and Fletcher in that final issue, there's a lot of angst. They're equally passionate about their points of view. And again, these are people who have lived their lives together, who've been intimate together, who are now partners in this sort of freelance soldier of fortune business that they have. They're passionate. They're ready to kill each other over their belief, and that kind of emotion really sells the story. Along with, as you said, Rocky, ENIAC scaring the shit out of humanity when the missiles launch. I love that scene with the secretary where he tells the president, he goes, "Yeah, I think we're well and truly fucked." It's absolutely amazing. And I can't imagine anybody but Doug Braithwaite drawing this, because he's equally good at emotion, especially when it comes to the facial expressions and the detail, but also the action scenes, the weaponry, the explosions, it's just fantastic. Gorgeous art, gorgeous colors from Diego Rodriguez. What a first series! What a great example of what Bad Idea is, right? A publisher that wants to put story first, high production value. If you have the hard copies of these, you know how amazing they are. Really thick cover stock, really thick paper stock, gorgeous art, gorgeous color. Just amazing. So.
Yeah, no, and thank you for very truly waiting, almost a year to give me the final two issues. But I thank you for that. I'll consider it an early Christmas present. So I really do enjoy this. This is again the only bad thing about that idea is that it's not as readily accessible to avid readers like myself as I would like it to be. But hopefully over time that will change. But we shall see.
Yeah, and there's lots of Bad Idea stories that do mail order. Unfortunately, Rocky's up there in Canada, so you got to pay through the nose for shipping. But if you're in the United States, if there's not a Bad Idea store that's close to you, there's a lot that do shipping. And then obviously, if you join any of their Kickstarter campaigns, there's a chance to get a lot of the back matter as well. So again, thanks everybody for joining us. Really appreciate it. As the 12 days of the Comic Source continues, we'll be continuing with the Bad Idea theme. Tomorrow's episode, we'll talk about Tankers, the 3-issue series from Robert Venditti as a writer, Juan Jose Reap on the art duties, 3 issues with more dinosaurs than you can shake a stick at. So we'll be back with that tomorrow. We appreciate the support as always, everybody. Don't forget to go to wherever you get your podcasts from. Do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe. Don't miss out on any of our audio-only content. You can check this out on our YouTube channel as well if you want to see some of the artwork and what have you. And then, of course, be sure to go over to YouTube and subscribe to Rocky's channel, Comic Space Boom ! He's got a ton of great content up there as well. It's where we post our DC Spotlight every week, so you can see all the DC books that are out every week on Tuesdays. So, as I said, we appreciate the support as always. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Catch you later.